Hey guys, so I'm currently here in Toronto, Canada. It's about 20 degrees and really windy. But I want to talk to you today about mechanical stresses. So forces are whenever you push on an object, twist an object, pull on an object. And in mechanical engineering, we talk about forces in terms of stress. So in short, stress is a force applied over an area. So you could have a really high stress by pushing on a small area lightly, or a very large area very hard, vice versa. So these stresses come in a bunch of different types. The most common of which is called compression. So you could think of that as pushing on something, squeezing something. I'm currently applying a compressive force to the roof of this building in downtown Toronto that I'm standing on. The second most common is called tension. That is the exact opposite of compression. It's when you're pulling on something. So if you're going rock climbing and you're hanging from a rope, there's a lot of tension in that rope. The third most common type of stress we see is called shear, and that is when you are pushing on an object in two different directions and you create a stress across the object. So if you take a piece of wood and bang it on something and it cracks, or if you take a pair of scissors to cut a piece of paper, you're applying a shear stress to that object. So it's similar to opposing compressive stresses, but along like one line, if that makes sense. It's a very concentrated stress. The fourth kind is torsion. This is when you're twisting something. So if you take a rope in your hand and twist it in two different directions, you notice that the rope bends with that. So that would be torsion. Bending stress would be another kind. So beams in a bridge, the top of buildings would all be in bending stress. That is when you have forces twisting opposite ends of something, such as a beam, to make it curve. So if you have a pencil in hand, you could twist the ends of the pencil in opposite directions and bend that. And then the last kind of stress we'll talk about is fatigue stress, and that is when you do any of these other stresses back and forth real quick. So if you push on something and let go, and push on something and let go, or pull on something and let go, and pull on something and let go, that's fatigue stress. So we call it fatigue as like, you can think of fatigue as when you get tired, you get fatigued. So once you apply fatigue stress to a metal or whatever object you have, you can wear it out and eventually that material will fail. So if we're going to talk about stresses, we should also talk about something called strain. Now strain is what happens when you put a stress on something. So strain is the deformation or the change to an object under stress. So if you have something like a rubber eraser and you put a little bit of pressure on it, you can feel the eraser move, you can feel it deform under your finger. Whereas if you're holding something hard, like the cell phone in my hand right now, I can't feel the cell phone squeezing even though I'm applying a compressive stress to it. Or like a metal beam may be under a lot of weight because cars are driving over it, however it doesn't bend because it's very hard. So there's your relationship between stress and strain. You put a lot of stress on something, you can create a lot of strain. They're directly related by something called Young's modulus. So that is a fancy word for saying how hard something is. So in a quick review, stress is a force applied over an area. So we create all sorts of different types of these stresses every day. You can look around and see things pushing on each other, things pulling on each other, things bending under weight of other things. So these stresses are all around you. And then strain is the result of these stresses in deformation of an object. So you guys go out into the world around you knowing this and look for these stresses and strains all around in everyday objects. Thanks.